Thinking lately about kind of early postpartum and honestly like having a bit of FOMO because we're getting to see moms so much sooner, a couple weeks after they deliver. There's so much more readily available information out here. Sorry for the wind. There's so much on social media. Like there's a lot more information on where to get started in postpartum than I had. My daughter's about to turn 10. And keep in mind, like, standard of practice, completely different. We just didn't do or talk about those things back then. So it wasn't that I didn't know, it just wasn't what we did. But I feel like it's kind of a double-edged sword in that it's almost too much. Like the pendulums are funny. When you have somebody come in and, they're within that really early, 6 to 7 weeks. And they're like, yeah, I started working out at 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, what did that look like? And in their excitement went to, any number of these, Insta experts who just post a bunch of exercises. And they may be a PT, they may be a coach, they may be a trainer. You know nothing about them other than they put this information up. And you're like, oh, that looks cool. Let me try that. And then you try and hodgepodge and patchwork stuff together. And probably in some circumstances that works. And then there's probably some circumstances which it doesn't. And you're either having leakage or pressure, or it's enough to make you, think twice about it. And then you go see somebody, and then kind of what are your expectations out of that session, right? And I think that's where, just because we start early, I think, the emphasis, yes, there's a lot about breathing, coordination, and that kind of stuff, but what does that mean? And I think that's what's missing. We need to start those first weeks focusing on basics like coordination. And what that means is you just bought an old house. The wiring isn't connected like it was before. And you got to make sure the wiring's working before you turn the lights on. And what that may mean from a symptom perspective is if what you're currently doing is causing you to have symptoms like leakage or pressure or, heaviness, or even if it's just a little bit, then what you're doing isn't working, and you need to go back and make sure that the basics are set and that the wiring's set up. And that sometimes I think is really hard for moms to realize is stupid important. And this is why. Is because when you're trying to build this building back up, if you're building on a shoddy foundation, if you're doing exercises and you think your deep core is firing and it's not automatically, and if every time you do an exercise, you cognitively have to think about turning on your abs, that's not going to translate to something that's dynamic like running. That's not going to translate to something dynamic like toes to bar or box jumping or things like that. And you may not notice it right off the bat, but later on. And I think that's the part that's really, really hard to explain is like, I can't guarantee, but what I do know about injuries is that when we don't have coordination right, when we don't have timing right, it sets us up for a shoddy foundation. And that's the part that we're building in the beginning. So sometimes it may be as simple with a new mom as, okay, let's take what you're currently doing, because if I take it away from you, you're probably going to kill me or not listen to me. Let's take what you're doing. Let's notice the current strategies that you are using that are not serving you, or otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation. And let's try some different ones and see if we notice a symptom change. And I know, like, on paper, when it's like, oh, notice, oh, just, do your breathing timing differently. It sounds stupid basic. I'm going to be upfront with you. It sounds like, oh, well, I just spent an hour on that. Fucking matters. Like, it really seriously does. And it's frustrating that I feel like I need to come up with a better way of explaining to people, like, these tiny little things matter because they add up over time, and that's what's going to result in your symptoms. And I don't know if people are kind of looking for like this big dramatic, like, okay, stop this, don't do that. Like, if you want that, sure, I'll give it to you, but I don't want to take stuff away. I want to enforce to moms that, like, how little do we need to change? If we make these tiny little changes, it's going to result in symptom change, and I don't have to take anything away. And it really can be that simple. So I don't know if I've made things too simple. I'm like, oh, well, it's not a big, it's a big freaking deal. And I say that from a place of knowing with my own symptoms, a place of knowing, having done this for 25 years, like, it's trying to take something incredibly complicated and simplify it and make it easier for people to build back that foundation. So I guess in essence of what I'm saying is, I'm so excited that people have earlier access. I'm so excited we're having these breath, deep core coordination conversations. But I think we need to be much more clear on what that means and what that looks like. Because if all you're being taught is to consciously turn on what you think are your deep abs, and probably you're getting your obliques in there too, or consciously contracting your pelvic floor in an exercise, that's not how this all works, okay? Like, our core and our pelvic floor are meant to work automatically. You can't think fast enough running to turn these muscles on. These muscles are supposed to turn on with the intent of doing anything. If that automaticity is not there, guess what? Something's going to break down. Maybe not early, maybe years from now, but it's going to happen. And I think that's the part of the conversation that's getting missed. Super excited that we're having this conversation, but I think there's a really important piece getting missed, which is why we're having, these women like get back to running and CrossFit and all these other sports, and finding that there's still this gap between what they were taught in those first couple weeks postpartum and then what's happening when they try and get to the stuff later on. So anyway, let me know what you think. Got on a little bit of a soapbox there, but I would love to know, like, for those of you that, started with stuff early, did you feel like you had an understanding of why coordination was important and what that meant, and the difference between cognitively thinking and turning on a muscle and retraining automatic function? Because I Got Money says a lot of people don't, and if you're not using imaging, you probably don't have a way to assess that. So if you're a clinician, let me know what you're seeing. If you are a mom and you're in that space, let me know kind of what your experience was or what you've been seeing. I would love to hear.